Hey y'all, it's Region 4 Outreach and Communications Coordinator Matt Cameron. And today on Drop the Tailgate, I'm going to show you how you can mount your turkey fan, beard, and feet inexpensively. All you're going to need is some barn wood, which you can get from most folks that have an old barn. A lot of them will let you tear it down and keep the wood, or maybe you know somebody that does that. This is about a 30-inch piece here. You've got a really nice long beard, bigger than this one. You might want to go 32, 33 inches for it. You need a picture frame to put on the front. To kind of hide the front of the fan there, and a little bit of hot glue, and a few nails and some screws. So this is an affordable way to do this. I don't know what it costs. I've never priced one, but I imagine it will cost you several dollars to have that done by a taxidermist, and sure can't afford to pay somebody to mount a whole bird right now. I got lucky and in fact a really desperate longbeard this morning, and they have to be pretty desperate for me to get them. But at any rate, I'm going to show you how to take the fan off, how to take the feet off and the beard off, and preserve those things, and go ahead and get them on the board. All right, to get started, let's go ahead and take the beard off, and you're going to pull the feathers back, and you're going to want to cut it up here on the skin. Don't cut it too low, or you'll cut the bristles loose, and you'll just end up with a pile of hair, basically. So make sure you get up kind of high on it. Go ahead and take that off. We'll lay that to the side for now. Next thing we're going to want to do is let's go ahead and take the feet off. All right, if you bend the feet backwards, up here in this joint right here is where you're going to cut. If you've ever skinned a deer and taken the legs off of it, it's kind of the same process. But cut into it, and you'll kind of feel that tendon give away there, and you'll see kind of what you got to work with. But you'll have to cut all the way around it. Give it a little bit of twist, and there'll be some flesh that you'll still have to cut loose on the back side. There's one. So there you go. All right, what we can go ahead and do with these, if you want to, is put them in the borax. I like to keep it in a bowl, and that makes it kind of handy for you. But if you don't do this, the skin can actually get rotten and fall off on you. And I've had that happen. And you know, this is just an average bird here. But if you had one with real long spurs on it, you sure wouldn't want to let that happen. So, all right. And lastly, we're going to take the tail fan off, and you're going to want to make sure that you cut up high enough, because I've not done it, but I've heard of a lot of guys who cut it too low and just end up with a pile of feathers. You sure don't want that to happen. So you're going to take more than you really need to initially, and you can always take some of that off later, but you can't put it back, kind of like getting a haircut. Okay, so we got the tail fan off now, and you can see that I've got way more feathers than I really need, but that's okay. That's better than not having enough. So what we're going to do now is take a knife and trim this back. Okay. Got the back side cleaned off pretty good there. I believe that one's supposed to go in front. And while we're back here, we're going to go ahead and start trimming all of this off that we can possibly get off. We'll trim it down. There's an oil gland in here that we need to cut out as well. But trim it down to each individual quill, and then we'll go in between each one of them. All right, so when you get the back trimmed up, you're going to kind of end up with a little half moon job right there. And what we're going to do now is try to go in and clean up as much of this fat and flesh as possible. All right, let's flip it over back to the front, and let's go ahead and take it down to about one row of these feathers. So just kind of start pulling them off from front to back. So I believe that's going to do it as far as this front row of little feathers. I think I'm going to keep what we have there. So now what I'm going to do is trim off some of this fat and flesh off the front side. So I have here probably the world's worst wire brush, but I'm going to give it a try anyways to try to get some more of this fat and flesh off. got the turkey fan. We've cleaned it up pretty good, and we're gonna put it in the borax and make sure you get a good coating of it all over. So now we're gonna lay the tail fan out on a piece of cardboard, and I went and got a thick piece of cardboard to hold the push pins down a little bit better. I had a thin piece, it wasn't working out so well, so I've got this thicker piece here. And what we're gonna do is just open the tail fan up and give it its nice natural shape. And to help you get started, go ahead and put a pin underneath the first feather on each side. Try to arrange the feathers nice and neat. They kind of overlap one another like shingles on a roof. So try to get those as best you can now, and it'll just make a much nicer finished product. Okay, so there we have the tail fan all spread out. I'm going to leave it for about a week like this and let it dry out real good. And I'm going to lay something on it to keep it flat, because these feathers will start to bend just a little bit and come forward. So we'll lay something out, we're going to give it a week, and then we'll come back and we'll mount it on the board. Okay, so I said earlier that we're going to give it about a week and then mount it up, but after I checked it, it wasn't hardly as dried out as I'd hoped it would be. So I gave it another week and checked it, and it was dry enough then. But what I did was I went ahead and cut each leg off right there at that joint to go ahead and level it, and that allowed the borax to get down in there and dry pretty good. And I've got holes drilled out in these, as you can see, that'll help us with the mounting process in just a minute. But see, these are stiff, these are dry and ready to go. So always cut them first and then put them in the borax, and they'll dry out much better on you, and that way they're not going to rot. You won't lose these scales. So the first step is going to be to mount the frame onto this little shelf right here. And the reason we're going to do that first before we attach the shelf is it's much easier to drive these nails with it like this, because if you go ahead and mount it on the board, then you try to drive the nails, you could miss, you could end up breaking your frame, you could end up bending this, or running the screws outside, splitting out your board. So I'm going to take this 2x4 down to the ground and going to lay this frame down and going to go ahead and attach it to the shelf. Now you'll see I've reinforced this frame with some staples on both sides, and that's just going to shear everything up, because if you miss and you hit this frame, it's just going to fall apart on you, and I've done that. So that's just a little tidbit for you. And this frame didn't suit me as far as the color went, so I found some stain and some gray paint, and I just kind of did a light stain and rubbed a little bit of gray on it to help it match that barnwood a little bit better. Okay, if you'll notice in our shelf, I went ahead and drilled pilot holes for each of the nails that I'm going to run, and that will come in great handy when you're doing this, because if you try to do it without the pilot holes, this wood, a lot of this wood is hardwood. It's not pine like you used to drive nails into, like this 2x4. It's very solid. If you try to drive nails into that, a lot of times it's really hard to get that nail to go in, and you'll end up bending your nail or you're splitting it out. So make sure you put pilot holes in this barnwood. And in the back side, there's a couple of pilot holes as well, and that's what's going to attach it actually to the board that we're going to mount it to. But we'll talk more about that in a minute. But we'll see if we can't get these nails driven in pretty easily. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is take and run some screws through the shelf to attach the feet. And I like to go ahead and run those all the way through, and then we'll take and we'll screw the legs up to the board instead of trying to run the screws down through each leg. Now once again, I drilled pilot holes in these, and I've already ran screws down in them, so they should thread on pretty easily. There's the feet, not too bad. They're pretty much parallel. This one may be angled in just a little bit, but I'll take it. I've done it worse. But a lot of that comes from how clean you cut the tops of the legs there. So, all right, next we're going to attach the shot shell, and I've just got a 1.25 inch screw ran up through there, and we're going to use a screwdriver for this. Do it the old-fashioned way. You could do it with a drill bit, but you're getting a little bit crowded in here, and it's kind of hard to get that drill in between all that without running into the legs there. So we'll just use a screwdriver, and I think I've got a pretty good pilot hole, enough drilled in that where this should go on pretty easily. So then position shot shell however you want it, whichever side you want facing out. All right, now we'll go ahead and glue the beard in. Now you'll want to hold the beard up, kind of put it up in there about where you think it's going to be glued, and then you can figure out which way you want to turn that beard. A lot of times they'll have a bit of a bend in them, like this one, so you can make it go straight out or to one side or the other, or you can even tuck it back in. So that's completely a personal choice. So keep your little hot glue gun around, fly hot glue around the end of the beard right there. This stuff solidifies pretty quickly, so you kind of got to work fast when you're working with hot glue. And I done stuck my finger in it, so it's not too awful hot. Okay, so we got the feet, shot shell, and the beard attached. Our frame is secured, and what I'm going to do next is go ahead and secure the frame to the mounting board itself. Earlier, I pre-drilled pilot holes, and I ran these screws through the back side. I marked the shelf right here and drilled pilot holes into this to line everything up. So theoretically, I should be able to hold this on here, run the screws in it, and secure it pretty easily. But stuff don't always work out as planned, does it? All right, so here's where we're at. Next step's going to be to put the tail fan on, and of course you've got the glass and everything out of the picture frame. You can work right through the middle right there. So let's take a look at the tail fan, and you can see it turned out pretty good. It's got pretty good shape to it. It looks like the feathers are pretty much lined up the way they need to be, but you can always work them into shape and get them in the right order if it doesn't suit you. All right, so to attach it, just lay it right on top of your shelf right there, and just line it up, center it in between the frame right there in the center of your board. All right, and it doesn't take much to hold the tail fan down. The feathers are so lightweight that really 1.25 inch screw kind of between the quills right there in the middle should hold it in place. So get it where you want it, run that screw in, just snug it up good and tight. So we got the screw ran in, got it tight against the tail fan, didn't overdo it because you don't want to run it all the way through there and make a big hole because then it's not going to hold very well. But I'm pretty satisfied with that. So really the last thing to do is to go ahead and put your picture in. Okay, so here's a look at the finished product. It turned out pretty good overall. I mean, it's not perfect, but when you're working with barnwood, it's not going to be. But that's the beauty of it. You don't have to be super precise with it because it is weathered wood. It's meant to look a little bit rustic and a little bit old. So it turned out really well. I'm very pleased with the price of it. I don't have a whole lot of costs involved in this. The wood was given to me. I bought this cheap frame from Hobby Lobby. Did a little bit of work on it. So I got some paint and stain, but it's stuff I had laying around. Used a couple of wood screws on it, a few staples to reinforce this frame, and some hot glue. So that's basically the only cost that I have in it. We're talking a few dollars really to mount something this way. So if I could stress anything about doing it yourself, it would be pilot holes, pilot holes, pilot holes. Drill those pilot holes in everything that you do because this wood is so dry. It's so dense. It's some kind of hardwood. I'm not a great woodsman, so I can't tell you exactly what it is, but those pilot holes are going to save your day when it comes to running screws and driving those nails. So drill your pilot holes. Just take your time on it, and don't be afraid to mess it up, make mistakes. If you do, you can pick up some more wood and start over on it. And another word of advice I would give you would be to reinforce your photo frame, because you're going to be beating on this thing, screwing on it, and it's very thin wood. It's very fragile. So reinforce that frame on both sides with some staples. And it's not the prettiest thing, but it will save you on down the road. But I hope you've learned something. So if you do it a different way, I would love for you to comment or share that with me, because I'm always looking for new ways to mount these things, and others might enjoy it as well. Anyway, comment if you learned something. Thanks for watching, and tune in next time for Drop the Tailgate on some more Tennessee outdoor adventures.